Hello and good afternoon to you. This is Newsspin. You on the air? Hello.
Sir, how are you?
I'm okay. The leader of the opposition, former Prime Minister, Mr. Alan Chastanet. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak with us, sir. Hello?
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Hopefully everything is... I said my pleasure. I said hope everything is well with you.
Yeah, it's okay. From my end, it's okay. But as for St. Lucia, I'm not too sure that we are okay. As usual, we have our lingering issues. Let me ask you, with regard to impacts, why your administration could not have settled this once and for all, although a promise was made by the DPP to look at some 7 cases. Some 7 police officers were under investigation because the other 5, it was discovered that there wasn't sufficient evidence to file charges against them. And the DPP did promise to look at the cases involving the other 7 police officers. Now, 2 years into the reign of this administration, still no word on impacts. What say you, sir?
Well, I think it's a very good question to ask. Certainly when I got in, we got into office in 2016, you would recall that it was a complete disaster. And in fact, we were heading down the road where, in addition to the police officers not receiving training and not being able to participate in any of the regional training that was taking place, we had no end in sight. We made it our point to provide resources, first of all, to a very underfunded DPP's office, both financially as well as from a human perspective. We got a new DPP, put new staff in place, and were able to give them resources for them to start the prosecution. As you know, the result of that effort was that 5 of the cases were deemed not to be prosecutable due to lack of information. But 2 cases remained. And a lot of work had been done on those cases. One was the bench case, and the other one was the View Fort shootings. I'm extremely surprised, in fact shocked and disappointed, that the DPP's office has not proceeded with the prosecution of either one of those. And I certainly know that one of the cases was very far advanced. Now, again, I want to make the point that the role of the Prime Minister's office was to provide all of the resources, but was not to be involved in any form of the prosecutions that was taking place or the decision as to how to prosecute. But I want to say to him that it wasn't just about the impacts and those specific cases, but it was also all of the other things that were taking place. So the work that we were doing in the police department, the work that we were doing in the forensic lab, the work that we were doing in the judicial system and building new courts, and trying to fast-track cases and going to a situation where we could have cases without a jury to fast-track some of those cases. All of those things were well on the way. And the big one, and I think the big one has a significant impact also on what we're seeing with the British government currently and the decision they made about Dominica, and the possibility that there will be similar decision made on St. Lucia and some of the other islands. And that is border control. On the separation of customs, where we would have the law enforcement part of customs being the border control and the revenue part of customs being within the Ministry of Finance. They may seem innocuous and unrelated, but I can say to you, Tim, all of those things were very much correlated. And then the big one really was how we were managing the CIP, because when we got in, the due diligence levels that were being implemented at the CIP were wanting. I can tell you that for sure, 100% certainty, none of the islands were going through the proper processes because the regional security RSS and impacts weren't even on the same page. And it took almost a year and a half of continual meetings to agree on a process moving forward. And part of that process, Tim, was that when we had applications in, we would have notified the U.S. and Canada and the U.K. and the Europeans in particular of those applications. We would notify them of the results of those applications. And at any time that there was an error or there was a change in information, and a person who had been granted a passport or citizenship was found wanting, we immediately rescinded that person's citizenship. So there was a very close working relationship. And I think that when this new government came in, and in particular with the Ukraine war and the decision by this government to continue allowing Russians, Iranians to apply when there was a clear boycott by the rest of the world. I think that that was a fundamental mistake. I think that the decision not to follow through with border control. So here it is that the British government spent in excess of $2 million EC in helping facilitate St. Lucia building a proper border control between consultants that came down, getting structures involved. The first thing that they did was that they removed the acting control of customs. The new controller of customs who came in very conspicuously decided to abruptly end the investigation that was taking place with Ernest Hilaire. And when I say investigation, it was simply requiring Ernest Hilaire to provide the documentation which would have shown who gave him permission to have allowed the car to be registered in the state's name, and very importantly, who gave him permission for the asset to be disposed of, for the asset to be given back to him. Because in the absence of that, Tim, it is a fraud. I mean, in essence, that he would have used his offices to benefit himself and to benefit his brother, and more importantly, he would have lied to customs when the car arrived, declaring that the car belonged to him. And while he may have paid for the car, but the fact that when he put the car in the name of the state, it became now the state's own at that point. But when you look at the combination of all of these things, Tim, I think that there is a very strong likelihood that what has happened to Dominica will also happen to St. Lucia in very quick form.
And the other issue, come Wednesday of this week, the St. Lucia Labour Party will be observing its second anniversary in office. What do you think about the stewardship of the government thus far?
Well, they have put this country in a state of fear. People are fearful to leave their homes, Tim, after certain hours. People are fearful to go to and travel to certain places in St. Lucia. People have become fearful of speaking their mind. People have become fearful of what's taking place economically, the cost of living in this country. People have just literally are in a constant state of fear. And that is what the legacy of this Labour Party is in 2 years. And to get into the point where you and I and everybody else can sense that something is going to break. People cannot be expected to live in a state of fear as we are. And what is fueling that fear is the breach of trust by this government. Every time you turn around, there's another breach of trust. They come to you and tell you that they're going to be imposing a 2.5% levy for health and security. We now know that that was a lie. That's not true. The fact is that they were intending to actually increase the VAT to 15%. But even they knew, and their own supporters knew, that imposing a 15% VAT in St. Lucia would be wrong. And so to try to justify it and to pacify it, they breached the trust of the people of St. Lucia. They breached the trust when they amended the Act, the Suppression Act. And look, listen to the name, the Suppression Act, because that's exactly what they are doing to the people in the South. They are suppressing them. And they're suppressing all the citizens of this country through the practice of fear and intimidation. What's taken place with Richard Frederick? What's taken place with the Banans land? What's been taking place with Rovergate? What's been taking place with so many other different issues in this country, Tim, is that there's been a significant breach of trust. Nobody can trust this government. And the foreign countries who have seen the same breach in trust have acted and are probably going to act. And guess who is suffering it at the end of the day under every single circumstance? It's the citizens of this country. They're the ones who are paying the price. They're the ones who currently can go to England without a visa, and very soon they will now have to apply online, and it'll be a selective process as to who can go to England. They're the ones that the cost of living have been passed on to.
My final question to you, what will be different about a United Workers' Party government compared to the previous one if you are at the helm?
Well, that's exactly what we're analyzing at this point. I have to say to you that I was a little bit surprised, Tim, that given the track record of United Workers' Party of growing the economy, and more importantly, how diverse our investment portfolio was. We were not just investing in roads, we were investing in schools, we were investing in healthcare facilities, we were investing in supporting facilities, we were investing in young people wanting to get into technology businesses. I'm surprised again that the offering and the basic understanding of what is healthcare insurance versus what is universal healthcare, that persons would have opted for something that's not achievable in St. Lucia. The government of St. Lucia by itself cannot afford to cover all of the healthcare costs. There has to be some level of participation. And to make that participation more affordable to everyone, Tim, it's about requiring every single St. Lucian to have a healthcare insurance. And those persons who cannot afford to buy the insurance, the state was going to provide that insurance for them. Those persons who were in jobs could pay as they went. And therefore, by that format, which has been successful in so many other countries in the world, would have been implemented. But we now, as a party, have been going through a process to understand what went wrong, and to make sure that we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. And what do I mean by that? I think that there are some fundamental policies that our party were undertaking that everybody did appreciate. There may have been some messaging issues, and the Labour Party did a great job in its own communication and messaging program against Alan Chastanet. So we're going to review all those things. If in fact that they were clearly policies that we were implementing that were egregious or unacceptable or people didn't understand, we're going to review those things. But we want to have a country in which every single St. Lucian has an opportunity for progress. But starts, Tim, there's no chicken and egg in this scenario. You must first grow the economy. You must grow the economy to the extent that the government is generating surplus revenues. So that when we want to fix our roads, we don't have to depend on CDP. We don't have to depend on any other foreign entities. Look what's taking place at the Millennium Highway. It is a disgrace that we have had to bring in foreign contractors to fix up an existing road. And look at the mess that's being made in that situation. Look what we learned during COVID when we had 3 major local construction companies that brought their own money to the table to proceed with the roads. It went much quicker and much more efficient. So I think that we must appreciate as a country, the first step is we must grow our economy. To grow our economy, we must invest in our infrastructure, and that infrastructure includes the people as the priority. So I'm very comfortable that we do have not only great policies, but we have the track record in showing that we can implement those policies. But I'm very concerned for the people of St. Lucia today, Tim, with the state of fear that they're living in under right now. Everything, whether it's to leave their home, to go somewhere else, their own private property, in terms of speaking out, everybody in this country has become fearful because we are living in a state of fear under this regime.
Mr. Leader of the Opposition, thank you so much for speaking with us on this afternoon's Newsspin program.
Thank you, Tim.
All right, just heard there from former Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Alan Chastanet.